Hey everybody, welcome back to Vegas Weekly for Saturday, October the 9th, 2021. It has been a busy week in Las Vegas. We'll talk a little bit about that, along with some tips about how you might want to plan out your next Vegas adventure. And then we will continue our strip walk by talking a little bit about the city center cosmopolitan area and what it's like navigating through that maze at some point. Hey, if you're just coming across the channel, please hit that like button, consider subscribing and hitting that notification bell. We talk about Vegas here a couple of times a week usually. If there's any big news items, we cover the details there. We give you some ideas about how you can best enjoy your trips to Las Vegas, whether it's your first time or your 50th time. Last Friday night was a very, very big Vegas meetup as part of the sort of Rocktober get-together, which sadly I was not able to attend this year. There was a major sort of concert, show, free-for-all at El Cortez called Granny Fest, hosted by Granny and Dice, and featuring a cast of dozens, literally. I think there was probably over 100 people present, including most everyone who had made it to town by that time. There were even some sort of bigger, famous vloggers there. I think they said that Sarah, the slot lady, was there. Norma Helly was there. So some folks that generally get quite a few more views than some of us. Also dropped in, and of course it was a very, very big night. If you have not seen the video, you'll want to. I'm sure that the whole evening's festivities are available on Granny and Dice's channel. I'll put a link to their channel in the show notes if you want to check that out. But in the midst of Granny Fest, they brought Keno Candy up on stage, presumably to help sing a little song. And in the middle of it, the one and only Keno Kid, my friend BJ, came up and proposed to her. And surprisingly enough, she accepted. So we have a wedding in our midst coming up sometime, I think, in the spring. But congratulations to those two folks. Really nice people. If you haven't had a chance to meet them, I think everybody's met them, haven't they? So that's kind of cool. If you just want to watch that footage, I think they also put together sort of a shorter version of the night's festivities that kind of focus in on the proposal and the pending nuptials, if you will. But that was kind of cool. I think there were only just a couple people that were kind of tipped off of what was going to happen. So, but yeah, a lot of vloggers, whether they be slot channels or Vegas channels or travel channels or whatever, were present, and so definitely worth checking out. And then on the following evening, you had sort of, I guess, the official Rocktober events. There was a group pull at Cosmopolitan. There was a big party bus, which looked interesting. They kind of drove around Las Vegas. And then eventually they made their way, I think, to Ellis Island. And again, I know that footage is available. Some of it got taken down because of some copyright issues, but I think it's been re-edited and put back together. And most of that you can find on Vegas Best Ideas page. And I'll put a link to their channel in the show notes as well if you want to check that out. I didn't watch a lot of what went on this past weekend. I was tipped off on the proposal thing, so I did turn it over in time to check that out. But I guess maybe I was just a little sour about not being able to be there. But yeah, it looked like folks had a lot of fun with that. And, you know, it seems like we're kind of now at the end of meetup season, which seems to be officially September and October. I know there's still some folks around Vegas, some vloggers. I know, like I said, Vegas Best Ideas, I think, is there for several more weeks. But they practically live there, so that doesn't really count. I know friends Steph was still in town. She was live streaming last night, and I think Keno Kid was in town until just last night, along with some folks like Daniel Ocean and Lee, and I don't know how long Blair was in town, but so there have been some people still hanging out and getting together. But it does seem like we've gone through about 6 weeks of get-togethers, and that does seem to be sort of winding down for the season. Who knows? Is that, I mean, it's apparently September and October are just the times people feel like getting together. Whether people will do anything in the spring, I don't know. I thought about doing something in the spring a couple years ago, and well, we know how that turned out. But so I guess my Vegas tip of the week involves sort of group activities in Las Vegas and how to make them work better. I think for a lot of us, we just kind of had this idea and have had this idea. I know when I was trying to put together a meetup, like I said, now almost 2 years ago, it was just kind of, well, let's find some place that seems like it'd be fun and I'll just invite everybody to show up. And that works pretty good if you've just got a handful of people who might show up. I know the first year that we did the summit, there was just, I think, 7 or 8 of us. So, you know, that wasn't a big deal. You can group yourself around a table. You're not going to really draw a lot of attention to yourself. There's plenty of groups in Las Vegas, 4, 5, 6, 8 people. And so, if that's the size of your group, you don't have to do a lot of planning. I mean, it helps to know, if there's anything particular going on in town at that time or at the venue that you're thinking about checking out. It certainly doesn't hurt to make a reservation. I know when we did the Mark Timber thing this year that Mark, Liz, and myself had each reserved a table that would hold 6 people. And so we kind of had a capacity built into that of around 18 people. And that worked pretty well. We had some people coming and going. We had some folks that just kind of showed up for a little bit, just, sort of pay their respects, say hello, and didn't hang out the whole night. But again, you kind of knew what you were dealing with. But as these things get bigger and bigger, and certainly they've gotten bigger and bigger over the last couple of years, you run into sort of more problems. I know we had some issues last year with Rocktober, being able to get people into the venue that we were trying to get into because there were too many of us. And that can be a problem. So if you're planning to go to a particular location, make sure that you've made arrangements in advance to accommodate the people that you're going to have. Now, I think one of the reasons why Rocktober ended up being on a party bus was that was one way to sort of kind of contain the total number of people that you were going to have and put a limit on that, and also make sure that you had a place for those folks to be, because it's not always easy to find a spot where you can get 30, 35, 40 people in and do so easily. And I know from talking to a number of my close friends in the vlogging community, but a lot of people aren't super comfortable with these massive meetups either. So and I go back and forth on it myself. Sometimes I feel like, yeah, I really want to meet all these people, and then other times I'm not so sure about that. But so make sure that you've plotted out, got some plans together that are fairly etched in stone for those sorts of events that you want to happen, to make sure that you don't end up having to leave people out or end up running into problems along the way. I know, at times there's also been issues with whether or not people can film someplace. And obviously when you're hanging out with a bunch of vloggers, people are going to try to vlog. So, if you're going to a particular, whether it be a casino or a venue of any sort, it doesn't hurt. In fact, it's probably a good idea to clear in advance with management security, or at least know what the rules are as far as filming, if that's something that people are planning to do. So, and as always, when you're planning any sort of group activities, and I think we've all done pretty well with this, and that is, don't plan too many big events. Maybe have one night where there's a lot going on, or a couple of times that you have a lot happening, and then have smaller sort of meet and greets that are more informal, that people can kind of come and go as they will, and then you don't run into some of the snafus that you might otherwise. So that's just a few things that I've learned from being a part of and watching a number of these events over the years. And again, as the community grows and as there's more demand and there's more people involved, it gets harder and harder to sort of figure this thing out. I can't. I remember joking at some point, and I know that hey, we may have to move this thing to T-Mobile Arena one of these years. Well, I don't think that's likely to happen, but when you're talking about, in some cases, up to 100 people or more that are in town for an event, it does get a bit overwhelming. So there you go. That's my tip. Pre-plan as best you can. It's going to help you out. It's going to make your guests' experience better. Speaking of planning, it doesn't hurt to plan a little bit if you're making your way up the strip from the sort of Park MGM area to the city center area. It's kind of a mess, particularly if you take the sidewalk as you might normally think to do. You run into a lot of congestion, stairways. If you're going to bypass most of city center and just head over to Cosmopolitan, that works out pretty well. You just make your way through the sidewalk there past the some of the shops and so forth, and there's like one staircase you have to climb, and you'll cross over a pedestrian walkway that'll take you right into Cosmo. That's pretty easy. But if you're looking to spend some time, head over to Aria or Vidara and those places, I'd really recommend just going ahead and making that trip one of two ways, either via the interior walkway. If you go to the back of Park MGM, you can walk right from there into the Aria, and it's a pretty short walk. I mean, I don't think it's even 5 minutes. And you don't have to deal with all the mess along the sidewalk and all the back and forth there. So I think it's really worth it. You can also, if you want to, you can pick up the tram that runs from Park MGM and goes all the way out to the backside of Bellagio, but also stops at Crystals, which is pretty short, pretty close to Aria as well, if you want to go in kind of on the other side. So, but yeah, otherwise that side of the street gets kind of messy, and you're curving around and you're having to climb staircases and you're going waving back and forth. So it is one of the more confusing areas to walk as you, certainly on that side of the strip anyway, and particularly if you stay outside. So I'd recommend, the last place you're probably going to be anyway is Park MGM. So just make your way through the back of the casino and walk over there, or catch the tram, particularly if you're planning to head up to Bellagio. Now, if you hit up Aria, decide to and want to head over to Bellagio, you can also, again, you could try to catch the tram there, but you can just walk over to Vidara, which is right next door, and basically walk straight in the front entrance and down a hallway that will lead you ultimately also to Bellagio. So, so that area there, if you stay inside, is pretty simple. But if you're trying to wander outside, not so much so. Obviously, we talked a lot about Cosmopolitan last week in terms of some of what it has to offer and some of the changes coming there. I will just speak briefly about Aria, since we're kind of talking about the casinos as we make our way through them. Aria, one of my favorite hotels on the Strip, and I will say hotels on the Strip. It's not necessarily one of my favorite casinos. It's a good casino. It's got most all the games you need. Doesn't have a ton of atmosphere, but I really do love the rooms, and I really do enjoy the hotel proper. It's also a place, if you really want to sort of live it up and eat at a lot of higher end restaurants, Aria has a number of very high-end, high-quality dining establishments, the kind of place you probably want to think about making a reservation for. But a very upscale property, but one to me that I find still very comfortable, more so than a lot of other properties that might also meet that requirement. Vidara, of course, won't talk too much about that. It is a non-casino hotel property, very nice rooms, very sort of utilitarian. You've got, kitchen facilities, in some cases laundry facilities. They're very much like little apartments. And so if that's something that's would be helpful to your stay in Vegas, then Vidara might be a place to go, but not really a place that people generally hang out. Okay, so next week we will talk a little bit more about Cosmopolitan. There's a lot going on there. We'll make our way up to Bellagio and talk about that iconic property. Hopefully the Strip Walk is being somewhat helpful to you as a viewer, listener. So definitely want to hear your feedback on that. So we're going to wrap up today's show, as always, in just about that 15-minute mark that we shoot for every week. We'll be back again next week with another episode of Vegas Weekly. We'll be back on Wednesday with the Wednesday show. Hey, if you got any comments, please leave them in the show, in the notes below, in the comments below, and we'll definitely respond to each and every one of those. And thank you for your time. I hope that each and every one of you have a great, lucky, and healthy week. We'll see you all back here again real soon. Bye-bye.